the word's just out. They're just so much stuff that when I retired, I said I'm just going to make the whole thing into a museum, and I'm going to see how it goes. I mean, it's just my thing. It's just a private thing, you know. But I've got it all. I might as well share it, type of thing.
Right.
But as far as making any money, I don't know if I'll make any money off of it.
Right.
They could. Wow. So I just started on this wall, my last wall.
It's just all the patience to organize it, you know.
Yeah, it's taken a long time.
Every single thing has been found on the beach.
This is the biggest drifting thing out there right here, these gill net floats. I forget how many tens of thousands there are in one of those 2-mile drift nets that the Japanese used to use years ago. They're banned now.
So this stuff would have come over irrespective of the tsunami because of the gyre that you guys are on, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, stuff comes in all the time.
Yeah.
The tsunami just compounded it.
Right, and you just got weirder stuff.
100-fold and a lot of personal types, you know. But this is kind of old school here. These are the newer ones because they're the softer foam. These are old wooden cedar floats, gill net floats. Actually made here in the Northwest that the Indians used net in the rivers and stuff.
Huh. Would this be one of the oldest things you have in the collection?
Well, as far as floats, yeah.
Yeah.
This is the small plastic.
Small plastic.
Display.
You just start to see it all over and over again, I guess, right?
Yeah. It was very interesting going through everything and putting it down. Container spill, Pentax camera bags.
Right.
And this was another container spill, the Raggedy Ann doll head.
So sometimes you can tell it's been a container spill because so many come up.
Oh, yeah, there was hundreds of those on the beach. Nike shoe spill.
Shit.
Those are Avia container spill, Avia women's shoes. This is the smoke bombs the Navy uses for testing off of here. Man overboard buoys and rat poison containers. This is the bigger plastic table here. Put everything. And the balls. A lot of these are tsunami balls.
Look at these dustpans.
A lot of those came in from the tsunami. So this is cork. This is one of the earliest floats.
Huh.
You know, they used it for life jackets and life rings and fishing floats.
Do you often find messages in bottles?
I have a 3-ring binder full of them.
Really?
In the house, I'll show you.
Really?
I was in a boat in Cyprus. One guy from Israel came to me and he said, please, I need your help. I was in Israel in the beach and I found a bottle. And inside the bottle there was a message. And I opened the bottle and the message was in Greek. So I have the message with me. Can you please read it for me? The message was going to a saint. This is considered to be a saint who makes miracles. So it started like, I don't know if you remember me, it's me, Maria, and I'm well in my health, and my children are very well in their health. I want to ask you a question. Last week or last month, I don't know, I met a guy, and his name is Kostas, and I think he's a good guy, but of course you know better than me if he's good for me. Please, if you think that he's a good guy, make your miracle and make him love me. And if that happens, then I'm gonna bring you my wedding ring because you did your miracle. That was supposed to go to Simi, to the island of Simi. And the guy found it in Israel.
So, a couple of months ago, I was asked to write an essay for a new publication that's going to come out in Stockholm this fall. And this was a first for me because usually I don't write to be read on the paper. I usually write to be to read out loud. So what I'd like to do this evening is read for you an excerpt from this essay because I'm in the middle of trying to figure out my narrative voice on a new film that I'm working on. So before I begin reading the text, I'll just give you a little background. For the last couple of years, I've been working on a project about messages in bottles. But when I say messages in bottles, I mean it in a very metaphorical sense. I was interested in what drifts in the ocean, how we use that drift to measure and remap the oceans, and also what people find on the shoreline and how they interpret what they find and ultimately what they do with that. These two video clips were the starting points. There was John, who by the time I met him was just about to open a beachcombing museum in Washington State in order to display the 40 years worth of things he's been finding on his local beaches. And the other starting point was the tiny Greek island of Symi, which is located in the southern Aegean Sea. Now, there's a tradition throughout the Mediterranean of launching messages in bottles with prayers in order to communicate with the patron saint of Symi, the Archangel Michael. And the monastery has some of these bottles that have been found on display in their little museum. I filmed both of these things in 2015, and by the summer of 2015, I, like many other people, had become utterly distressed by the dangerous sea crossings that people have had to make and still make in order to claim asylum in Europe. And I had to ask myself whether I could continue this project about drift in the Aegean and messages in bottles when so clearly the context had changed. I thought perhaps my resources and time would be better spent as a volunteer. So for the past year and a half, I've been volunteering in Greece, mostly on the island of Lesbos. And recently I've returned to the idea of the message in a bottle, whereas now the message in a bottle has been interpreted as a call to act. Keep your children in sight at all times. Warning: crossing Bulgaria can be extremely dangerous. You can apply for asylum in any country that you enter. Fingerprints will be taken in many places. On the Greek island of Lesbos, volunteers have fastened several pieces of laminated A4 paper to the metal gates of the port of Mytilene, the island's capital. The information is written in Arabic, Farsi, Pashto, and English. My Arabic interpreter Kate and I have been in the port since dawn. We've just finished a day of interviews with women seeking asylum in Europe as they wait for the ferry to Athens. After the interviews, Kate and I go to a restaurant and take a table next to an old man who is sitting alone eating his dinner. He seems at home, like he eats here every night. It's very smoky. Everyone still smokes in restaurants here. Kate complains to the waitress. It's December in Lesbos, and perhaps the old man, upon hearing us speak English, correctly assumes that we're not in Lesbos on holiday. Why else would we be in Lesbos in the winter? And knowing why we're here, the old man turns to us and says, In 1922, thousands of people escaped the burning of the city of Smyrna, also referred to by its Turkish name, Izmir, by crossing the Aegean Sea on makeshift boats. Many of the people of Lesbos are either descendants of those who survived the perilous boat crossings during that week in September 1922, or of those who were uprooted during the mandatory population exchanges between Greece and Turkey that followed soon afterwards. Close to 1 million Greek Orthodox Christians in Turkey and 500,000 Muslims in Greece were forced from their ancestral homes and exchanged in what is called mubadele in Turkish and katastrofia in Greek. Catastrophe, a word used in ancient Greek drama to describe a reversal of what is expected, a turn of events, from kata, downward, and strophe, a turning. In that first week of December 2015, the majority of the women that we interviewed started their sea crossing from the Turkish shore next to the city of Izmir, sometimes still referred to by its Greek name, Smyrna. Thousands of asylum seekers have been smuggled from this area in the hopes of reaching Lesbos and beyond.
Yeah, she's what moved me in the beginning.
Eric Kempson and his family live next to the beach in Eftelou, in the north of Lesbos. Eric is a beachcomber. He earns his living by making crafts from the driftwood he finds on the beaches. While walking on the beach one spring morning in 2015, he finds the debris of a journey from people who made the clandestine crossing from Turkey to Lesbos in the middle of the night. On this particular morning, he finds a doll next to a child-sized life vest on the beach. One hand shakily films the other hand, putting the doll and life vest next to each other, as Eric's off-camera voice thickens with grief, then anger. Eric posted his first video blog that day as a plea for help. His family's house has been converted into a supply depot, a rescue base, and a beacon for volunteers like myself. You could say that the doll Eric found on the beach was a message, which he interpreted as a call to act. Close to Eric's house, a statue of Theophrastus overlooks the Aegean Sea in the fishing village where Theophrastus was born. In Mytilene, Lesbos' capital, a street is named in his honor. Its walls are scrawled with love declarations, anti-austerity messages, and an anti-fascist slogan derived from a Greek pop song. It was Theophrastus, legend has it, who launched the first message in a bottle to learn about the flow of the Mediterranean. A fairly obvious experiment for someone who was born on Lesbos. Throw a bottle into the ocean and see where it goes. We do not know what Theophrastus learned after launching his first message in a bottle. But in 1893, the Norwegian explorer Fridtjof Nansen took this experiment a step further. He designed a boat that could withstand the pressure of the Arctic pack ice. This boat was called Fram, Forward. Then, with a crew of 12 people, he drifted in the pack ice for 3 years, drifting over the uppermost reaches of the frozen Arctic Ocean. Prior to Nansen's expedition, the prevailing scientific theory predicted that if a boat could cross the Arctic pack ice, it would reach an open polar sea and then sail directly to the North Pole. This belief explains why so many expeditions ended tragically, why boats continued to sail into the ice only to be surrounded and crushed. In fact, it was the debris of one of these ill-fated boats which Nansen interpreted as his call to act. An American boat called the Jeannette was crushed in the ice in Far East Siberia. 2 years later, debris and personal effects from the Jeannette were found drifting with an ice floe on the other side of the Arctic Ocean, off the southwest coast of Greenland. Nansen interpreted this debris as evidence that the frozen Arctic Ocean still circulates via currents and gyres, just like the rest of the world's oceans. How else could the Jeannette debris have ended up on the other side of the Arctic Ocean? The debris spoke from and about distance, revealing a scientific reality to Nansen that few others believed at the time. 110 years later, in 2006, a two-masted sailboat named the Tara was lodged in the ice in order to catch the same current that the Fram used to drift over the top of the world. Like the Fram, the Tara was designed to drift for years in the polar pack ice, allowing its crew to gather a constant flow of scientific data. Unlike Nansen's expedition, the Tara expedition had 2 changes of crew. Myself and 2 scientists joined the expedition halfway through, thanks to a small plane that could land on the ice. The Tara traveled on the transatlantic polar drift, which was unknown, or at least unnamed, until Nansen's expedition. The Fram drifted for 3 years in the ice. The Tara drifted much faster, not quite 2 years. This has been attributed to the decreasing thickness of the pack ice. And like the Fram, we drifted over the top of the world, skirting but not quite reaching the North Pole. In the moments before the ice released us, the Norwegian carpenter, who trimmed and waxed his mustache in the style of Fridtjof Nansen, he got onto his knees at the prow of the Tara and launched our message in a bottle. I feel as if such a bottle has fallen into my hands, the fulfillment of its mission, assisted by the whole enormous element of the ocean. The Russian poet Osip Mandelstam compared writing poems to launching messages in bottles into the sea. Somewhere, someone will find the poem and read it. In Mandelstam's essay, The Interlocutor, he stresses that the poet must write to an unknown person, to an unknown addressee, that there must be some kind of distance to overcome by the act of writing a poem. Yet, the distance was far greater than even Mandelstam assumed in 1912 when he wrote The Interlocutor. That was years before his poems became a danger to him and he was persecuted, before the majority of his written words were censored during his lifetime. The seafarer had a critical moment, cast into the ocean a sealed bottle that contains his name and a description of his fate. Many years later, I find it in the sand while roaming in the dunes, read the letter, learn the date of the event and the last will of the deceased. The letter sealed in the bottle is addressed to whoever finds it. Being the finder, I am thereby the mysterious addressee. The Museum of the 1922 Refugee is located on one of the southern tips of Lesbos, far from the bustling capital of Mytilene, and even further from the picturesque villages in the north where Eric and his family live, and where the majority of the asylum-seeking boats have been arriving. That seems a world away from this quiet village, with its half-demolished factory complex, a basketball court and playground, alongside a cafe on the square with a sign written in English, "Rooms to rent." Several men are repairing a fishing boat on the dock. My friend Eva pulls over and asks for directions, and one of them replies with a smile. We arrive as the museum keeper, who is also the co-founder, is opening the gates. Sunlight pours into the former schoolhouse. A hand-painted map on the wall depicts what the Greeks have historically called Asia Minor, which includes most of modern-day Turkey. The museum keeper walks the length of the map, which covers an entire wall, sweeping her arm over the breadth of the yellow ochre-painted landmass. As she gets to the shoreline, she starts speaking out the place names, touching them with her finger, and her finger lands where we are now. The museum is filled with personal belongings, mostly ornately embroidered clothes, some jewelry. The jewelry isn't very valuable, the museum keeper says. The most valuable things would have been used as currency upon arrival in Greece. She points to a vitrine containing a small doll alongside a blue knitted blanket used by her neighbor to carry her 2 children across the sea. They were all she brought with her. The museum keeper explains that some people had more time to leave, like her family. They managed to bring their sewing machines with them. Above the sewing machine are bar graphs, maps, pie charts, detailing the population exchanges. Next to this is a group photograph of around 50 people, mostly women, children, the elderly, the new arrivals, taken outside what is now the village cafe. Their heads are slightly turned to face the camera. This age is my age, is a beast, my beast. No one can look it in the eye. As none could fix its vertebrae with their own blood as glue, the broken backbone of 2 centuries. But anything alive must drag its backbone with it, so compelled, as far as one can, as its short life allows. The waves play and plash the lines of spinal cords. They can't see, nor we. Mandelstam's poem Wiek, The Age, was written the same year this photograph was taken, 1922. That same year, Mandelstam married Nadezhda, who would save his later poems by committing them to memory, line by line, stanza by stanza, strophe by strophe, strophe, a group of lines of poetry, a turning, the part of the ode sung by the chorus while turning. In the vitrine surrounding the group photograph are official documents, like the Nansen passport. In his later life, Friedrich Nansen, the Arctic explorer who interpreted debris lodged in an ice floe as a call to test out his theory about ocean drift, he became the High Commissioner for Refugees for the League of Nations. The Nansen passport, which began being issued in 1922, was an internationally recognized form of identity for stateless people. It's been said that Nansen and his office contributed to the institutionalization of the refugee. One can only wonder what was the catalyst for Nansen's third career, beyond that of a scientist and explorer. Was it the remains of that crushed boat, the Jeannette, reinterpreted years later as a call to use his power and influence for humanitarian causes during the last decades of his life? Nansen won the Nobel Peace Prize that year, and upon receiving the prize, he wrote to a friend, "My scientific work has convinced me that everything goes in cycles, in waves. It is my consolation that even if the periods of decay can be long and the wave trough steep, a crest comes again, if only one can wait." Eva and I clean up the remnants of the coffee and the cakes that the museum keeper made. She insists that we take the rest with us. We leave the museum and return to the harbor, the seemingly run-down village imbued with significance. In the middle of the square, there's a slab of white marble standing upright. We hadn't noticed it earlier. Eva translates the Greek inscription. Thank you.